The main wound women have to heal in this lifetime is the voice that tells them that they don't have to shine as bright as possible, which means being as authentically them as possible, as authentically divinely feminine and expressive and loud as possible. Most women invite men who match that voice of shame and suppression to then have an awakening to the fact that I am not going to listen to this man who's telling me to not be my loudest self, my most bright self. When that woman calls out that guy and ends a relationship with them, she's essentially ending the relationship with that voice in herself that dumbs down her uniqueness, her authenticity, and her light. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the New Age Sage podcast. I have just spent a month in Hawaii, away from the Matrix, detoxing my brain, really getting clear on what message I want to bring to you guys. And this just came to the forefront of my mind from that hiatus. And I'm excited to tell you all about it. The topic essentially is how the success of your love life is dependent on how wise you are to viewing your exes as a magical guide towards what you have yet to heal to call in your ideal partner. Okay, so why I bring this up is that the single biggest mistake I see in dating is victimizing your exes, such as calling them narcissists, bad people, they were terrible, because in that process, we ignore the reality of we were attracted to them. We were attracted to their toxic traits. In actuality, their toxic traits are what drew us to them in the first place. So if our ex's toxic traits drew us in, what does that say about us? What does it say about us that we are attracted to toxicity? And every single person, I have not met one person in my life yet, all of us have some level of wounding that we're attracted to toxicity. Think of the common sentiment that the key to being attractive is to, not need anything, to be hard to get. That's the correct word or phrase. People who are hard to get are usually the most successful in dating. That's interesting. So people are universally attracted to unavailability. So the fact that we're all attracted to unavailability speaks to the fact that we're all deeply wounded when it comes to intimacy. The people who get the most romantic validation are the ones who are scared of intimacy the most. So what does that say about society? That we're all deeply wounded. Okay. When we play the blame game with our exes, saying they were the problem, they did this, they did that, they were a narcissist, they were a bad person, we're escaping the need for accountability in ourselves. What part in ourselves attracted the narcissist? What part of ourselves attracted someone who love bombed us or treated us horribly? Okay? That's when reality sets in and we can heal the impediments towards finding true love. The impediments towards finding true love are the parts of yourself that were attracted to the toxicity in your exes. Okay? To summarize this initial point, if you play the blame game and victimize your exes, you escape and don't have to face accountability with yourself as to the part you took in the situation. Only when we take accountability on the toxicity of our exes and the parts of ourselves that attracted it, only then can we identify the wounding that once cleared can open the road towards a healthy, loving partner that isn't toxic. Okay. Now, I am not fucking perfect here. I'm actually delivering this message because I am one of the most imperfect people I know when it comes to this topic. So, not recently, maybe like a year and change ago, I attracted in someone who wasn't the healthiest. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to call them narcissist, not going to call them a bad person. I used to, and I was deeply incorrect. They had unhealthy patterns that I was drawn to, and unhealthy for me. Maybe not unhealthy for someone else. They had unhealthy patterns for me and what I needed for healthy love. Okay. I spent months victimizing that person, saying they were XYZ. They did these bad things. It wasn't me. It wasn't me at all. And I never healed from the experience until I acknowledged and saw what part of myself attracted that. So essentially, I called in someone who was very mothering and deeply intuitive and knowing. And I called her in, pretty soon after my mom had passed away and I split ways of my ex of 3 years. And my need for mothering was then projected to this person. So I didn't see her deep flaws for what I needed in love because I was blinded by her ability to mother me and caretake me. Because I needed that because my mom was doing that and she was dead and my ex was doing that and she wasn't here. So that wounding blinded me to the unhealthy traits that I find unhealthy for me. I only healed from that experience once I realized that if I need a girl to mother me, I will never call in a healthy partner because they're actually carrying through their own trauma to caretake, and I'm being caretaken. And that's not a good dynamic for anyone. And that's most dating woes, I think, are manifested in that split between caretaker and caretakee, if that is a word. I believe it is. Um, Once I realized that I had to mother myself, I had to learn to be intuitive myself and guide myself and not need a masculine mother type figure to do that for me. And only when I did that, I erased the possibility of attracting in someone like that in the future. It's been, a year and a half, and I haven't attracted anyone close to that archetype at all. Zero. But I would have if I didn't realize that. If I had that experience and I stuck to the label of narcissist, bad person, she sucked, I was right, she's crazy, right? If I stuck to that language, I would have never been able to face the fact that I had deep wounding and I needed mothering and caretaking. Once I faced that and healed it, that possibility of attracting in that kind of person went away and I opened up a new possibility for a healthier partner. So when we victim blame and refuse to take accountability for the toxicity of our exes, we will attract that same toxic pattern over and over again because we're refusing to face what in ourselves attracted it. And if we don't face that, we'll keep attracting it. If you don't heal the wounding in yourself that attracts toxicity, you will keep attracting it over and over again until that wound is faced. Because when that wound is not faced, you attract the toxicity reflecting your own toxicity, right? The issue I see with people is that they place all the blame of toxicity on the ex. But you're equally toxic if you attracted the toxicity. That's a hard fact people don't want to face. If you attracted and love toxicity, you are equally toxic in yourself. Only when we face that fact can we actually move forward and clear that wounding to find someone more aligned with love and truth. Okay. Now, I'm going to lay down a couple of steps. So I presented a general overview of this concept, right? Why we have to look at our exes objectively and ourselves objectively and truthfully to understand where we're coming out short in our pursuit of love. Okay. So I'm going to lay out specific steps now and actions you can take to make that a reality. So, step one, let's label this step, write down the common patterns or think about it, right? Essentially what that means is I want you to map out your exes on a piece of paper and write down the common patterns of all the exes. And I'm not talking about physical. What's misconstrued in dating is that we perceive a type to be physical. Personally, I love a blonde blue-eyed woman. That's a woman I tend to go to. But the real type is actually an energetic blueprint that the same level of wounding that you have to heal will attract the same person regardless of what they look like. So your type is actually energetic. For example, if you're someone whose father wasn't around, you learn to love someone through absence, through them showing up all of a sudden and giving you lots of love and then disappearing, and you haven't healed that, you will attract men who follow that role over and over again until you heal that. And those men could look very different. But the fact that they have that energy within them that you need to face to heal, you'll keep attracting that pattern over and over again. Okay. So we're not writing down physical traits, although that may be important, but not for this episode. I want you to write down what patterns of these men cause the most triggers and wounding to release inside yourself. Think of the moments you were deeply in pain, alone in your bed, sobbing and crying, calling your friends, where you felt a complete loss of control. And that loss of control made you deeply uneasy. What traits in themselves cause those feelings, right? Now, I can lay out general archetypes that may fill into this role, but that's not entirely useful right now. I think what's useful to begin with is talking about my story, because hopefully by me showcasing how I identified these traits, these commonalities with my exes, that process helped me to identify and heal it. So my pattern, like many of us, is if a woman didn't blow hot and cold, I couldn't love her. Essentially what that means is I loved a woman who would show severe interest. Like, let's say we were at a party. For example, I'm trying to think my first time I fell in love in college. This woman was seemed very interested in person. She was very close to me. I could feel the sexual energy. I could feel the intuition, the God tuition that this is deep. There's a deep love here. There's a deep. Obviously, we weren't in love yet, but my soul knew this is a person. Both of you are in a contract to do something to heal together. I knew that in my body. I wasn't spiritually awake, but I could feel something deep beyond just trivial flirtation in a bar. But if she stayed hot, if that person stayed super interested, texting me back soon, was communicative in how they liked me, I wouldn't have been able to fall in love. But the fact that that woman then blew super cold, that she would go from very interested to not interested at all. She would take days of space in answering. She wouldn't text me. She would be distant when we saw each other, and then she'd come super close and show me a lot of love. That pattern made me weak to the knees and fall deeply in love, because my mother did the same thing when I was a kid. When I was a kid, my mother would show moments of intense devotion, specifically when I was ill. And I was ill a lot because I had severe health issues in regards to my asthma and eczema. So I was unable to breathe a lot and always bleeding in my body, which was a pretty harrowing experience to grow up with. But I look back and laugh because it taught me a lot. So she would show me increased signs of love in those moments because she was so worried about my sanctity and health. But other times she would leave me to the nanny and go out doing her things. So I received a very hot and cold form of love from my mother. And I love her deeply. Oh, bless her soul. She's not here with us anymore. She's passed on. But that's what's tough about losing a parent, is that you love them so much and you don't want to look at the fact that they fucked you up, but you kind of have to heal. So it's a weird predicament I'm in, but I'm being truthful with you guys. That was the pattern I experienced as a kid. So as a kid, my brain learned to love the feminine through her being very invested, hyper invested, and then blowing cold for days and seeming cold. And then I would take that personally, and that addiction to taking it personally is what I experience as love. So that was my blueprint for love. And if a woman didn't blow cold, I couldn't be in love because it's not what I thought love was. Unconsciously, I needed love to be blowing hot and cold because that's all I knew as a kid. I didn't know anything any better. So we don't really know what love is until we heal what we believe love would be as a kid. So that relationship destroyed me. It taught me so much. I'm that person I hold very close to my heart because she taught me. She spiritually woke me up. She hurt me, but she didn't hurt me because that led to so much truth and healing in my experience as a human. So I thank her deeply, and I always have love for her because she healed me inadvertently, but she healed me. Now, that experience led me to go to therapy and start reflecting on these things. And I knew the pattern. I knew that was a pattern from therapy. And yet I still attracted the same person over and over again. When I was 22, I'm 26 now, living in LA for a summer, I was fresh off a breakup. I was in an era where I was, very full of my way I looked. I had a hairstyle and a goatee that I thought was hot. I don't think it was. And my fantasy was always to date a billboard supermodel and for them to pursue me. I think it's any guy's fantasy, really. And I got that. I was shopping in a store, clothing store, and this woman liked me who worked there. She was working there part time and also modeling part time, and she was on billboards in LA. And like my other ex, I felt this immediate knowingness of there's a contract here. Now, even though I was therapized, is it a word? I think I'm making up words this podcast. Even though I was aware of the pattern, it still had an unconscious hold on me because I was aware of it, but that woman, that model, still exuded the same exact traits. In person, she was hyper invested, hyper caring, hyper sexual, and there was this charge between us, and it was super, super deep, and it was a beautiful experience in person. But whenever we separated in physicality, the communication was non-existent. We'd text maybe once or twice every couple days until we saw each other. That's normal, right? But I needed more. Now I'm not like that, but I needed more at that time, and she wasn't giving it to me. And because she wasn't giving what I needed in terms of consistent romantic and interest, that again had me weak at the knees. I fell in love within 2 weeks. I was obsessed with this woman. So obsessed that within a month I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she, thank God, rejected me and broke my heart. Because had I fallen in love with that woman, I would have been severely, severely screwed because I would have gotten into a relationship based on my deepest pain and wounding. That was the most extreme last iteration of that experience. And then, funnily enough, getting away from that experience, I got back together with my other ex, who actually was a healthy form of love. So, which I needed that experience to remind me of what I actually wanted, which was deep, real love. Now, sorry to make it all about me, but I think it's important to explain how this pattern shows up for people. This was, I think, maybe 10 months ago. I was fully convinced I'd healed this shit. Fully. I was cocky about it. But if something's going to humble us, it's the unconscious mind. And what it like paralyzes our intellect over and makes us convince ourselves that we're not doing the same things over and over again. I call it the ego's biggest fantasy. I met my ego's biggest fantasy, which was a woman who was exactly my physical type. Blonde, blue eyes, nice booty. I'm an ass guy. Sorry to be TMI, but I'm trying to be honest here. Super fit, a California way of being. Like my ego's literal biggest fantasy. She was a self-help podcaster, spiritual, and there was again that knowing between her and I. And there was this deep, intense, when we first met, there was an intense thing of like, oh yeah, this is going to be a thing. But then, and I was feeling good about it, but then of course she pulled back, became very inconsistent in her communication. It was a pain in the ass to even do anything about it. And that drew me in even more. I liked her even more when she pulled back. And that was, thank God, the last straw for me. I looked at myself and I was like, why am I more interested in someone when they pull back, right? And that showed me I had deep healing to do. That whenever I only cared about someone when they pulled back, it was an unconscious spell of trauma that would make me fall in love with someone. And that's no way to fall in love. And I broke that spell by disengaging from that situation. And since then, I haven't done that at all, um, which has been cool. So I'm saying all that those personal anecdotes to show that it will take years of attracting the same pattern over and over again until we identify what in us caused it. And then healing what caused it is the road to finding true love. And I do believe the final boss stage is the ego's biggest fantasy. I just had this conversation on X podcast with my closest friends, Alex Wolf. Check it out if you haven't. He had the same thing. He had his celebrity dream crush, one of the hottest women in Hollywood, pursue him right as he met what he perceived to be his true love, which they're together now, and it's a beautiful energy. I feel it. He said no to that experience. And then his true love manifested, and it was a beautiful experience. And I think we're all going to face that. We're going to face the final boss stage of our ego's biggest fantasy physically and fame-wise maybe, for our unconscious to tell us, hey, are you past this wound? Have you healed this thing, right? And once you say no to the ego's biggest fantasy of romance, which is just a combination of what we like physically, combined with our traumatic blueprint, once we say no to that ego's fantasy, that's when real love comes in, right? You ask most women who find their man, they have to say no to the typical guy they would look at normally. That's always a story. A woman's like, I broke up with this guy who was the bad boy or typical, asshole, and then this super amazing loving man came in, right? Because we had to say no to the ego's biggest fantasy to really, for our unconscious to know, I'm past this wounding. This is not an experience I want for myself. This is not something I want to entertain. So there's something I call the twin experiment that my guru shared with me when I was younger, which is a very useful image that, for example, let's say that blonde, blue eyes, ego's biggest fantasy woman I discussed earlier. If she had a twin, right? There's two women, and that woman had a twin. Would I honestly go for the one who was healthily showing me signs of love, or the one that was matching my trauma's need for inconsistent validation? Almost all of us unconsciously will pick the twin that actually triggers our wounding because we have to heal it. So that's real, right? If you ask yourself, like, if my ex at that time had a twin, and that twin was a healthy lover, and it looked exactly the same way, would I honestly go for the healthy twin or the toxic one that triggered these feelings in me that made me fall in love, per se? And that's a useful symbol to face nowadays, is like, when you're seeing someone and you're questioning if they're toxic, imagine a healthy version of them as a twin and ask yourself, which one am I more drawn to? And that will tell you all you need to know, really. So that's a useful thing to consider. So I will attempt to describe a common pattern I see in women who fall for toxic traps, because I think it's the only universal one that I see in all women, because I think there's very individual traumatic wounds that women possess, but there's also general ones that exist in the feminine archetype. So the one I commonly see is a man and woman start dating. They're on equal footing initially. They're equally bright, equally vibrant, equally loving, equal in attraction, physical presentation of attractiveness. But then throughout time, the man subtly puts down the woman over and over again. And years pass, and she's a shell of who she used to be. And you see this, right? A woman's vibrant, beautiful, sexy, confident. And then over time, she becomes a shell of herself, and this guy kind of owns her. I think most women have been through that experience of attracting a guy equally, but then over time feeling like you're a shell of yourself, and this guy has so much power over you that he's basically dimming your light constantly because he knows he cannot shine as bright as you. When a guy knows he cannot shine as bright as his woman, he will unconsciously do things to dumb her volume down to be quiet and less bright because it makes him feel less insecure about his inability to shine bright and be authentic, right? So a lot of women attract in men like that as an opportunity to heal the wound in themselves that doesn't allow themselves to shine bright. The main wound women have to heal in this lifetime is the voice that tells them that they don't have to shine as bright as possible, which means being as authentically them as possible, as authentically divinely feminine and expressive and loud as possible. Oh, most women invite men who match that voice of shame and suppression to then have an awakening to the fact that I am not going to listen to this man who's telling me to not be my loudest self and my most bright self. When that woman calls out that guy and ends a relationship with them, she's essentially ending the relationship with that voice in herself that dumbs down her uniqueness, her authenticity, and her light, right? Most women have to have that experience with a man to double down on their commitment to shining as brightly as possible and not having any guy dumb down their light and never accepting that trait again, both in the man and in themselves. When a woman refuses to dumb down her light in herself, she'll stop attracting men who shine, who are so scared of her shining, right? It begins with the woman. Now, all women have to use that experience of attracting in a guy who dumbs them down and dumbs down their volume and their brightness to fully step into their power, to say, hey, I'm not going to tolerate any man putting me down and dumbing down my volume and my brightness and my feminine expression. That experience for most women is when they become awake and attracting a healthy partner. So that's a general experience I can speak to for most women when it comes to this. And women will keep attracting a guy who puts them down until they stop putting themselves down. When a woman stops putting herself down, she will stop attracting a man who puts her down. And most women have to go through that experience of attracting in men like that to fully understand the importance of being 10 toes down in their own power. Okay. Now, the next step in this healing protocol is to understand the power of the unconscious mind. So, we're going to get into some nitty gritty psychology. Sorry if it's boring, but I think it's really important to know. The unconscious mind is similar to the immune system of the body. When your immune system encounters disease or the potential for disease in your body, it will send antibodies and red blood cells and healing components of your body, cytokines, all these things. Again, I don't know if that's a word I just made up. Goddamn. To basically return your body to homeostasis. So it identifies potential diseases, sets the alarm system, and brings in healthy protocols inside the self to heal. Now, the unconscious mind will do the same as the immune system. It identifies danger in the form of disease in the form of unconscious wounding and will attract in people, places, and things, but for this episode is people, romantic partners, to present the wounding to the individual as a mirror to say, hey, you have to heal this. Red alert, red alert, red alert, this is dangerous. You have to see this in yourself for you to heal it yourself. Now, the immune system heals by itself, essentially. The unconscious doesn't. The unconscious needs you to partake in the healing experience to move on. And actually, the immune system does, because you have to eat healthy and drink water and shit. So there is some symbiosis there. But the unconscious needs you to see the wounding to clear it. And it can only make you see it either through dreams, which most people can't know how to analyze, or through real people coming in to show you where you're hurting. So it will actually invite in toxic romantic situations that will hopefully show you where you're not free to stimulate healing so the mind can return to homeostasis, just like the immune system will attack disease to return to homeostasis. Everything in the body, mind and body, is trying to return to homeostasis. This means that you will attract in people who mirror your wounding until you heal it from the unconscious mind, because your unconscious is deeply interested and invested in you becoming whole and integrated. Okay. As I explained in the earlier section, once you have identified the pattern of pain you keep attracting from others, once you identify the toxic pattern you see in your exes, you have to identify where it came from, as I explained, right? In my process of identifying it was hot, cold, right? And why I had a need to do that. In this process of figuring out where it came from, where your pain came from, you have to have deep compassion for the experience that caused it, right? So back to what I said earlier, that pattern of being attracted to hot and cold women was because my inner child needed that to feel safe, because that's all he knew for emotional safety. Now, most people begin this process of healing their toxic traits internally by shaming them, by saying, essentially, how could I be doing this? How could I possibly be attracted to toxic people? How could I possibly be triggered because they're not answering me, right? I mean, then we shame ourselves. And that's what most people do when they start becoming aware of the wound, right? You become aware of the wound, and the awareness is light. So you see the darkness and the light, but you shame it and you get insecure about it. And that ruins the whole thing, because you cannot heal what you hold in shame. If you're ashamed about your toxic patterns of love, they will remain toxic because they're coded in the vibration of shame. Only when we have compassion for that wound can it clear, because that wound is a little child. That wound is a part of yourself that was a kid who needed that form of love to feel safe. When that kid feels backed in a corner and yelled at and shamed, they're only going to be more sensitive and more retaliatory. Again, making up words here. So only when we see that pattern with deep love and compassion can it clear. Think about this, right? Let's say the pattern is you get super triggered when someone isn't answering your text romantically, right? And you're sitting there, shaking and being anxious. How does it feel in your body if you were to shame yourself for that experience? You tense up more. You only can relax the body when you look at the person who caused it as the inner child and have deep compassion, and also tell that younger self, I understand. I get it. I know why you're upset. I'm here with you. Once we say that in that moment, healing can occur. But when we shame ourselves and don't see the true root of this, which is a hurt child, we stay stuck in that frozenness, right? We're frozen because we don't want to have compassion for the part of ourselves that's hurting. Again, your unconscious mind will bring in people that triggers wounding because it knows you have to heal it to return to homeostasis and be integrated as a human being. And the only way to heal it really is to identify the pain that caused the toxicity and have compassion for the younger self who needed that form of wounding to survive. So, of course, your younger self is going to create pleasure and love from toxicity from the parents, because how else can they feel safe, right? For a kid to reject the parent and reject that unhealthy form of love, they then reject all love. So of course, kids are going to learn to romanticize unhealthy behavior from parents, because that's the only way they can feel love, right? And any kid wants to feel love. So you have to have compassion for that child who had to romanticize unhealthy love, or else they wouldn't feel love. And all kids have to feel love to be alive. So it's important to have compassion for that part of you, and that compassion opens up deep healing. Okay. The next section is a different form of unconscious blocking that manifests as a deep terror of intimacy. So, a common phrase I hear in dating, and I took part in this for a long time until recently because I identified what was causing it, is this concept that there are no people in my city for me. And the most ludicrous example that I hear are people in New York City being like, there are no people in New York City. You're telling me there are no people for you that could be a worthy partner in a city of millions and millions and millions and millions of people. Okay, what does that mean? If you're rejecting the potentiality of one in millions and millions and millions of people being romantically viable for you, you're just rejecting the possibility of love, right? If you can't believe there's one person for you in a city of millions of people, you're unconsciously rejecting the idea of love because you're so terrified of the possibility of meeting someone truly healthy for you. If you say there are no people in my city for me, you're just telling yourself that I'm not ready for love, right? And why aren't you ready for love? Why aren't you ready for true intimacy? Why aren't you open to the possibility of there being someone for you in the world? Ask yourself that. Why am I not open to the possibility of there being one person for me in a city with millions of people? Because I'm not ready for true love. And why am I not ready for true love? That's the question. What about intimacy terrifies me? Think about this. Would someone who is truly ready to meet their partner and truly ready for intimacy and love believe that there's no one for them in a city of millions of people? No. That person knows that love will find them because they're ready, even if they're in the middle of fucking nowhere, right? So, what would make someone or you or me, because I had this belief literally until a fucking week ago. I had this exact belief until a week ago. So I'm in this exact camp with y'all. The question for this section is, why would I, you, or someone not want genuine intimacy? Why would I not be open to the possibility of a 1 in a million person finding me? Why? Okay. Intimacy, essentially, the definition of it is in the linguistics of it, in the diction of the word, intimacy. Into me I see. Can I tolerate someone seeing into me, seeing all of me, seeing the parts of myself I don't want to look at, seeing the parts of myself I'm ashamed of? Can I tolerate someone seeing all of me? And if you cannot tolerate someone seeing all of you, you are not ready for love. You're ready for fake love, right? Real love comes when you're open to showing all of you. That's intimacy. Into me I see. I'm allowing you to see me, right? If you don't allow someone to see you, you're not ready for love. You're ready for fake love. Okay. A good example of this is sexually. You know, I fortunate enough to have had many sexual encounters in my life. Whether I'm proud of that or not is a separate conversation. I don't know the answer to that. I've been with a lot of beautiful women, thank God, and that's an awesome experience. And what's pretty insane is that universally, no matter how, you know, sorry, it's arrogant, but it's useful for this example. I've been with a lot of women who are objectively are perceived as perfect. They're 10 out of 10s, very, very attractive. And I've been with women who are maybe 7 out of 10s. I hate to sound vulgar, but I'm just using it for this example. I've been with women who are less attractive, and I've been with women who are the most attractive, and almost all of them need the lights off during intimacy. And I would never shame that. That's perfectly fine. But why is that? Why do most women need the lights off to be very dark to have sex? Because when you're having sex, you're at your most vulnerable. All of you is open. Your genitals, literally, all of you, your wrinkles, your stretch marks, your imperfections, you're laid bare. And if the lights are off, you're basically reducing the chances of someone seeing your imperfections. If the lights are off during intimacy, you're reducing the chances of someone seeing all of you, right? And if you're someone like that, which is most women and most men as well, essentially what's happening is you are not ready for someone to see all of you. Ask yourself, would I be comfortable having sex with someone I like with bright lights? It's a weird question, but it's like, that means that I'm comfortable with someone seeing all of me, even the parts I don't love, right? And that's the same thing for emotional pain and our actually internal life, right? That like the goal in love is to be ready for someone to see all of us, both sexually, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Once we're ready for that, that means we're ready for true intimacy. And until you're ready for that, you will not be able to attract someone for you. And you will keep believing things like there's no one in my city for me because you're not ready for genuine intimacy. And your unconscious mind is creating a belief to protect yourself from facing that reality. Actually, that's incorrect. Your unconscious mind is constantly giving you opportunities to heal. And that phrase of "I don't believe there's someone out there for me in a city of millions" is your unconscious showing you how insane you're being and how unready you are for love. That's a wild thing to believe. And I believed it. And it took me seeing the ludicrousness of that sentiment to look into myself and see, wow, I'm really not ready for intimacy. And the solution here is, what parts of yourself do you need the lights off for, both physically and internally? When you're going into sexual situation, what physical part of you do you need to be in the dark? Is it your thighs? Is it your cellulite? Is it your mole on your back? Is it your actually how your vagina looks? If that part of you is in shame, you will never want someone to see it. And that begins with you seeing yourself. When you accept the physical imperfections you have, you can open yourself up to genuine intimacy. And more importantly, what internal parts of yourself are you ashamed to display to your lover? Is it your trauma? Is it your needs? Only when we own our trauma and our needs are we actually allowing genuine intimacy to find us. So that is actually the most important part in this process, is identifying what parts of ourselves we need hidden in the dark and placing light, love, and awareness on those parts of ourselves, because then we can undo the spell we put on ourselves to avoid intimacy. Okay. Next step. Have some gratitude. The truth is, no matter how toxic our ex was, and I know abuse is a fucking really tricky thing. I'm never going to defend someone's emotional or physical abuse. But if genuine healing, which always comes from that, if we look at ourselves and say, what part of myself attracted me being tolerant of abuse, right? Once we heal that part of ourselves, that's a gift. That's a massive gift. Once we heal the part of ourselves that was open for abuse emotionally and physically, that's a gift. The person is still a bad person. Well, what they did was horrible, even if it was minute and manipulating you. While their actions were deplorable, the gift of awareness and healing they gave you was beautiful. That's a hard duality to hold. That whatever toxicity your ex gave you, your ability to heal it, transcend it, and become a better person is beautiful. And that's a duality you have to hold. And that gratitude makes it able to exist. That, yes, this person wasn't great, but they gave me a massive gift that helped me heal myself. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm saying that because that perspective is what opens us up to the possibility of stopping victimizing our exes and refuse and take accountability. Okay? Now, another point in this section is that when we've been hurt by a man and we refuse to have some gratitude for the healing we experienced or forgive them, we will unconsciously expect men to be the same way. So, for example, if most women who had one terrible experience with a terrible guy will hate that guy, call him all kinds of names correctly, but then refuse to look in themselves as to what about me in my powerlessness attracted this. And because they don't want to face that wound, they will keep a perspective that all men are like this guy, that all men are abusers, all men are terrible, all men are this, all men are that, because that belief system keeps her protected in facing her own pain. When we reside in that consciousness that all men are basically the same as our ex who was toxic, we're blocking ourselves off from the potential of a good man finding us, because our unconscious, again, will keep giving us the same men that we expect men to be until we realize that that's not the truth. That belief is blocking us off from real intimacy. Because if I believe that all men are terrible, guess what I won't do? Fall in love with a man. So of course, then you will believe these things until you see that ludicrous belief and say, "Oh wow, one guy's toxicity, one guy's terrible behavior is blocking me off from believing that one amazing man exists." And most women reside in that category of hating men because one terrible guy abused them. And that's a horrible thing to experience, but are you going to let that one guy's terrible actions block you off from all love and the possible ability to connect with someone who truly sees you? Do not allow one guy's bad behavior make you believe all men are terrible, because if you believe all men are terrible, you will never attract someone who isn't terrible, because you want to confirm that belief over and over again to protect yourself from processing the pain that comes with healing from that experience. Okay. Also, when we forgive that toxicity, we end up forgiving ourselves for taking part in that exchange, right? Once I forgive that ex who I believe was toxic for me, and I understood why it occurred, I then forgave myself for attracting it. And that's a real thing, right? Our unconscious knows that we took part in the exchange, that we attracted in the toxic partner and we tolerated the abuse way too long, or the bad treatment. Once we forgive that exchange, we also forgive ourselves for doing that. And that releases some pressure from our unconscious and ourselves, that like we're taking ownership and forgiving ourselves for being so helpless. To summarize, identify the pattern you keep calling in of toxic men or women, sorry to make it male-centric, and what created that desire in the first place. So, toxic pattern I keep calling in. Part of myself that's in pain, that I haven't healed, that's calling in that pattern to heal it. Okay, now, how do you heal it? Love that part of you that's wounded and figure out what it needs that you have to give it, right? You can only give yourself healing, not someone else. We're looking for healing in a partner, that once I find this partner, then I'll feel safe, loved, whole. No, that's not the way it works. You have to feel those things yourself first. And how do you do that, right? Look at the pain and wounding that keeps you from attracting real love, and only keeps you in attracting toxic patterns. And look at that part of yourself, the inner child who caused it, and love it. See it. What does that part need? Attention, validation, self-caressing, expression, artistry. Give yourself what you've needed a partner to give you in the past, because that opening of needing someone else to heal you is what attracts in these toxic people. So, give yourself that experience that younger self needs. Someone else can't heal your inner child. You have to. And to do that, you have to see, what does my inner child need that I've been placing on other people this whole time? And that mostly is seeing them, loving them, playing with them. Once you have that exchange, that inner dialogue with them, they're then less likely to hijack your mind and attract a toxic partner to do it for them. Okay. Now, one of the last points I want to make is your unconscious, as I mentioned earlier, will test you. You now have the awareness and consciousness to make true change and stop attracting in toxic partners. I've been there. I gained that awareness. But my unconscious kept testing me. Again, it will present you wild fantasies, erotic fantasies, idealized partners that you never thought you could have attracted, that exhibit the same wounding that your trauma is attracted to. That person will keep coming until you really say no over and over again. And when you say no over and over again, that's when real love finds you. Again, this is why when you meet women who are very healthily in love, they will tell you, I had to say no to my usual type and welcomed in someone and I never would have thought I would have married. That's always a sentiment in any healthy marriage I see, is a woman saying, I went against my normal type. Because you said no to the unconscious wounding, and that opened up the possibility of real love finding you. I can guarantee we all will have those temptations of toxic partners over and over again until we say no, put our foot down and say, I am ready for real healthy love. Also, problematic men or women who cause terrible things in your life to happen can only latch onto the parts of yourself that are insecure and haven't healed, right? When I attracted in quote unquote toxic partners, that was really just an extension of myself. They only were able to enter my consciousness and my heart because the opening of I need you to blow hot and cold wasn't healed. They then latched onto that experience and gave me what I needed to see what I had to know to heal. So to guard yourself from toxic partners, you have to heal the open loop of toxicity that needs that experience to heal. Once you heal that loop will close and you'll open yourself up to healthier partners. I hope this helped. This has been the deepest and most potent medicine in my experience, is truly diving into the unconscious mind and seeing why am I still attracting the same toxic pattern over and over again, and why am I drawn to love it? That answering that question and sitting with it is more potent than any psychedelic known to man. Truly looking at your romantic wounding and why you keep attracting toxic people is more powerful than mushrooms, ayahuasca, all these things, because it gets to the core of our pain rooted in the fact that I will tolerate love and behaviors that validate my belief that I'm not enough. If we keep falling in love with people who validate our belief that I'm not enough, healing that is the most potent medicine you can give yourself. I hope this helped. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to even speak on these things and have people listen. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.